Hi, Grace Lynch again. I want to do a little piece now um, on the failure of contextual language. Um, so, when I experienced aphasia and I was trying to find my way back into the world of social language, I did not know what it was that had happened to me. Um, it was 1987, and because there was no one there to tell me that my brain had been altered, the only other tool that I would have had to identify what had happened to me was the thing that I had lost access to. And so um, more and more I came to build, even though words came back, um, I, when I tried to find objective mechanisms to decide that I'm building language correctly, and then lined up to ask myself whether actually the method works, whether I can trust that I'm doing the same thing other people do when they operate within a certain paradigm. I look to social justice, I look to grammar, and I look to logic. And on all three counts, it not only failed for me, but it failed for everyone else too. By which I mean that I found that the most glaring example was that I was taught about social justice largely by women because my father had died when I was 10 years old. And the women in my life, my mother, my older sisters, taught me that it's wrong for people to hit each other, it's wrong to call names, it's wrong to shame people, to objectify them. And in the very next breath, in all kinds of situations, they would regularly denigrate and demonize men. They would insult them. They would call them stupid. They would be incomprehensible. They would feel no shame at all in shaming the men and talking about men as if they were bad people and they were ununderstandable and the reason for all the problems of the world. Very often I wouldn't hear anything positive about men, and I would see them slap and smack and hit and insult, and the men were not supposed to hit them back because I could only conclude women got to hit men because they had all these feelings that were very difficult to process, and men were supposed to be understanding. It's unfortunate because this taught me more than ever the incorrect thing that women are weak, because if they were strong, they'd have to suck up their feelings like men do. But no, women don't actually have to find discipline for their feelings. They can act out. They don't have to. They don't have to tolerate stress the way men do. They can take it on anybody that they like, and the men will support them in that. It's a really distorted thing growing up. That was only one example. Later in life, I would learn that the concept of white privilege was created by a white person. So it doesn't surprise me at all that a white person would linguistically be entitled to decide this thing that's true for all white people, because of course a white person is entitled to dominate the world with how they think, and that's co-signed easily. Male privilege was created by a woman. No surprise at all. I had lived all my life with women telling men what they mean, what they feel, what they're worth. It was just like, it was a whole societal thing that I had lived in my whole life. So grammar, I've been taught the rules of and have been pretty good at it, and quickly found out that although the theory is that people should communicate with correct grammar in practice, nobody actually uses correct grammar. No two people fail at grammar in the same way. I came to quip that from my perspective, everybody bends language slightly differently. And so when people use language, everybody actually, to me, sounds like a different language, like a universe of badly tuned violins. When I tried to use correct grammar, I sounded formal, professorial, and actually was very difficult to get laid. So grammar wasn't actually the way people interacted in language either. That one was out. And the last one was logic. I love the idea of logic. I wish that everything could go via logic. We would all proceed logically. And I love the definitions of logic. And then I encountered the work of Kurt Gödel, an Austrian logician who came around about a decade after the other logician, famous Austrian logician Wittgenstein, who'd written Tractatus. And Gödel proved that essentially that in any complex, any derived logical system complex enough to support even basic arithmetic, there would necessarily be student statements derivable that either were true and unprovable, or statements that were valid and demonstrably both true and false within the system. So logic wasn't a stable language system for me because it disqualified itself as that. And so more and more of the words that came back to me as I started trying to build my life again came from my perspective and how I felt in the process of building the meaning. And this is after the brain injury was when I started studying English. I started studying creative writing. I fell into the mentorship of Anthony Boccioni, who had done his PhD in neurolinguistics and had actually written his thesis on deep image poetry and created an apparatus that was based on the supposition that the experience of the reader is part of the content of the poem. And it became a very interesting idea to me that the experience of the person building the meaning of a word becomes part of the meaning of the word. And so it did make sense later when I realized people would sort of decide the meaning. Well, I had seen it before. People would decide the meaning of men, not only based on the definition physiologically of a man, but based on all these cultural things that came along, feelings they had about them, personal experiences they had. Everybody had their own individual experiences. People didn't really talk about their individual experiences, but nevertheless, they would functionally, the meaning that they would use and psychologically glom onto incorporated the personal experience. When I tried to understand years later that what I eventually came to do as language was it was inseparable from the experience I'd had of living in an aphasic state. I had a problem because the definition of language that I had read was communication between two people. And underlying this meant that the only way that could happen was if the two people could share the experiences and be building meaning from essentially the same world. If that was the only definition of what language was, then I had a problem because my language came from an essential, like a foundationally aphasic experience. My autism all my life lets me perceive the world without language as an endless piece of continuous music. I don't have to work at that. It was how I understood mathematics so easily because all the words and ideas fit together in one and only one way that I don't have to work at, and I just look at it. It's obvious. And it's a beautiful thing. It sounds like a crystal bell or something, like a perfect bell. So because I could process meaning outside of language and then build meaning from there, no one else could share that experience because no one had ever been there and built meaning from there that I'd ever met, then our words were coming from two different experiences, so we could not possibly be communicating. And I had a choice in looking over my life as I began recovering from brain rehab, grappling with the meaning of my trauma. And I had a problem because I realized that traditional meaning, the only valid meaning, was a kind of shared contextual meaning based on a shared experience. If that was the only valid meaning there was, then the bulk of the entirety of my adult life must be meaningless. I could never defeat that logically, but in the end I decided if a person wants to treat the parts of their lives that they don't know how to treat as a collective experience, as a shared experience, as meaningless, have at it. I wasn't going to do that, and because of that I had to entertain the notion that meaning is much more than a collective experience and can and must, to be sane, involve the individual experience, each individual finding their own way to express it. So more later. Bye.